welcome to another episode of the Plant Power Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Tamara Marie, and I'm super excited to bring you another conversation in this week's episode. We have Natalie Matthews, also known as the Fit Vegan Chef, returning to the podcast, and we're going to talk about how do you build your glutes. So a lot of women are working out and really trying to focus on different body parts. And a lot of people tell me they want my arms, right? They like to have a nice toned look in their arms and shoulders. But then there's people who also want to work on improving their glute size. And if you've ever lost a significant amount of weight, then you know that if you don't have muscle under there, then they're not going to look that great. Have had clients before complain that they're losing their butt as they're losing weight, and we don't want to lose the curves, right? So in this episode, Natalie and I are going to talk all about how to build your glutes. She's also going to share what she's been up to during her off season and when she plans to compete again. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Natalie Matthews.
Welcome to Plant Empowered Fitness, a podcast for amazing, ambitious women like you who are ready to get in the best shape of their lives. Your host, nutrition and fitness coach, Tamara Marie, will show you how to transform your body with optimal plant-based nutrition and pain-free muscle toning techniques so you can burn body fat, shrink your waistline, and boost your energy without suffering through hours of intense cardio. In every episode, you'll get simple, actionable advice so you can thrive at 35, be fierce over 40, and fabulous at 50 and beyond. Here is your host, Tamara Marie.
Hi, Natalie. Welcome back to the Plant Power Fitness Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, and I'm excited because I have been watching your progress. I think the last time we talked, I think you were preparing for your next season and bodybuilding. And talk a little bit about where things have been since then, because you also have launched your cookbook. I know we talked about that before. You weren't sure. That's come out since then. I know it's been a huge success. So just give us a little bit of an update on what's been going on with you since your last season competing and all the great stuff you're doing on social media.
Yeah, thank you. So the last time that I was here, you're right, I was getting ready for my competition season. So that was 2023. And I competed from March all the way to May. And it was a very eye-opening season. It definitely did not go as planned, but the more important thing was that I was able to bring my best. So I was pretty excited with what I put on stage, with the exception of one of the shows. But it's so hard to nail all the looks. So yeah. I was really happy that we were able to nail 3 out of the 4. And yeah, then after that, I transitioned to my off season, and I've been in off season ever since. Before my competition season started, I launched my second ebook, and that is Fit Vegan Kitchen. And it is like this labor of love, and it took me like 4 years to develop, but I'm so happy that I took my time with it because it's recipes that I know everybody, tries and loves, and they're for every skill level. So I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, and I saw, I remember seeing some of your videos. I was watching your last season and kind of following, and I know that you did have that one show that was really tough. And even George was saying how hard it was to watch you go through, because I think it was something with the spray tan, like you had done so many shows back to back. And I think people don't realize like all that goes into getting on stage. I think we just get like glossed up and you just like rinse it off and everything's fine. To talk a little bit about the show that didn't go as well, like what was your biggest lesson learned from that experience? Because I know it was really tough for you to go through, because I know you wanted to do so well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think none of us train to like get dead last, none of us train with that in our mind. So obviously you want to be realistic, but you also want to like train to win. And you put in so much work, and it's not like things that you do over a course of a week. It's like months and months and years leading up to this one moment for it only to be like destroyed by one simple thing as tan. So what I learned from that show was, because this was my first time doing 4 back-to-back shows. So I've never done that in a span of 5 weeks. And what happens is like your body starts getting drier and drier and drier. Your skin just doesn't take the tan as it normally would. And you would think like, oh, you have to exfoliate, but exfoliating actually made it worse. When you're that lean for that amount of time, the skin just doesn't heal as it normally does when you're, in a caloric surplus or in maintenance, and you start creating little scars. So what happened is when the tan was laying, like it was literally falling off, like skin was falling off my body. So there was nothing that was looking good. And then on top of that, I think with the stress and the carb up and just me second guessing that little thing, I ended up spilling over. And that was another lesson learned. Like, my body could only take so much carbing up back to back to back before it starts turning into body fat. Like, that's completely normal. There comes a point where the metabolism's just like, okay, now I'm good. And now it's just like a little bit wishy-washy. So that was really a great learning experience. Not fun by any means, but great learning experience, because now I found my limit. And now I know, okay, maybe 3 shows back to back is the limit. I'll do a little bit better at skin prepping and moisturizing, because oftentimes we are, told that we need to have that skin dry so the tan adheres better. But when you're doing so many, it could go the other way where it's too dry. So that's what I learned. And, I always try to like find the positive in all of the experiences and always like come out learning. But yeah, it was definitely hard. And I probably like being stage lean and in your mindset made it even worse, but it wasn't a big deal. You know what I mean? It wasn't a big deal. Looking back, I'm like, come on, Natalie, it's just tan.
Right. Yeah. And I remember, so for you saying you learned your limits, I think I learned that too. My last season, I did a ridiculous number of shows. Like, I didn't know where I was like the whole month of October and then into November. And I was like, part of it was like the show bug hits you and you're like, I want to do more shows, because you're like, I want to improve, or I want to change something, or I want to try a different look. And then you get to a point where, like you said, your body is like, you are crazy. We're not doing this anymore. Like, how much do you want us to take? And I know for me, I did a show unexpectedly because I had planned to do the Ben Weider show in November. And I didn't realize I had to do a show before that in order to qualify. I had to do an NPC show first. And I literally, like, the week after I did my last show, I was planning on taking a week off, and I just had to go to stage because I was like, I need to do this so I can go to Weider. And I was not prepared. I did no like peak week. I was just like, I had the same thing. I had just had a tan. I feel like I had the darkest tan I ever had. And I was like, why am I so dark? And I thought it was going to look horrible. And it was so funny. Like, the photographer was there. He said, do you want pictures? And I was like, no, this is going to be horrible. Like, I'm not even like ready for this. Like, I had overdone it with carbs too. And I was like taking my week off. And so I told him, I don't want pictures. He said, well, look, if you get pictures here, then I'll throw in like the pictures for Ben Weider too, if you're going to do that show. And I was like, well, that's a deal I can't refuse. But when I looked at the pictures, they actually came out pretty good. Like, I was surprised, but I was in my head like, this is going to be horrible. My tan looks a mess. Like, I got my makeup last minute. My hair wasn't great. Like, I just was so critical. But it's actually one of my favorite set of pictures from my season, because I had my purple suit that I wanted. We talked about that before. Like, I finally got a purple suit. And I was happy with how it turned out, but it was a lot. I think it was too much. I think I ended up doing 5 or 6 shows. I don't even remember. I will not do that again either. I think 3 is a good number. So I'm planning for that next season too. So, and one thing just I want to mention for anyone who's listening to go, why is this Puerto Rican and this Black girl talking about getting tans when they have like, they already are tanned? Like, people don't realize for bodybuilding, we all have to get the spray tan. It's just how you look on stage. Like, you don't look good if you don't get, I call it body paint because it's really not tan. Like, tan would be making me lighter, but I consider it like body painting because it is like art, right? They're trying to show the physique, show your muscle definition. So it's not like, going to sit on a tanning bed. It's actually like they're spraying, it's like a spray tan, so to speak. So
Absolutely. And it's almost part of like our costume, it's almost just as part as like the suit and everything. It's all a part of like the look. It looks crazy in person or when you see the pictures, but it's a must.
So let's talk about your off season then, because I also saw 2 things I saw you posted that were really inspiring to me. One is you were talking about the contrast between competition prep and how you felt and like the suck of it, and just getting back to being just lean and healthy and happy and doing things that you enjoy. So can you talk a little bit about transitioning out of competition prep into just regular fit, happy lifestyle and how that feels now?
I think a lot has to do with the fact that I've done it so many times, it gets easier with time. Like, I never had like that easy of a switch, and I think it's because I knew what to expect, and I've been on both sides where I like done everything perfectly, or when I didn't adhere to a reverse diet whatsoever. So I knew, again, you learn your limits and you know how do you want to approach that. And one big thing that I have lived by, especially the last two preps, was like, it's not over until that reverse diet is over. And having that in my mindset really helped me just stick with it and just have like that ultimate goal of like a body where I can live at happily.
Yeah.
So I'm really strange. I don't love my body when it's stage lean. I don't love it at all because I get very insecure, believe it or not. I love it where it's at right now. So when I'm stage lean, it's not my favorite look. I only do it for the purpose of getting on stage and because I love competition prep as a whole. Like, I love conquering prep, but I do not like what it does to my body. So I was like, okay, I need to make sure that I live at a place where I'm like really comfortable. And usually for me, that's like 12 to 10 pounds above my stage weight. But even this year, I've been able to put on a little bit more muscle mass, which has allowed me to increase that weight. So even when we have those goals in our head, you know, you can't like just be like, oh, I'm gonna stay here, because then you're gonna stay the same, you know? So I've been able to increase, and I've been actually at 15, and I'm like, man, I'm loving how I'm feeling. I'm performing well. I don't feel sluggish. I am seeing PRs. But yeah, there was a transition period where you have to adhere to those reverse diet calories. So you can get to that point where your body is trusting you, where it's at like a really happy place where you can incorporate free meals and just be a little bit more flexible. Because right after a competition season, your body's just so depleted. It's like craving anything and everything. So you got to be very gentle with that transition. You can't go from 0 to 100.
Talk about that, because you said you've been through it so many times and you've had times where you were able to adhere to it and not. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think there's a bodybuilder I've talked to, amateur, pro, whatever level, like if they got lean enough for stage, everybody has almost had like a time where they've overate or had a binge session after a show, to the point that I feel like it's even part of the sport. It's like this unhealthy idea of like having that meal, the celebration meal, or whatever you want to call it, reward meal after the show, where it's just like Skittles and Reese's and like fattening foods and bowls of pasta and pizza. And it's just like the worst thing you could do to your body, because when you're that lean, it's like the only time you can actually create new fat cells. But even intellectually knowing that, your hormones are so off, like your hunger hormones, your sex hormones, that I don't know a bodybuilder that has been able to get through every single prep flawlessly. So can you talk about like what was different about your reverse diet? What helped you adhere to it this time versus some of the times where maybe you, like you said, you didn't do things perfectly? Like, how do you feel that process is? Because it's really hard, because you're literally fighting your body.
Absolutely. I feel like definitely, again, learning from those negative experiences from the past. And again, I don't want to use the word negative because it was a learning experience. So in 2019, I was like, I don't care about a reverse. I'm just going to go back to my normal. And this was around the time where, what was the word? It was called the recovery diet. So instead of doing it slowly, gradually back, people were going just completely switching off and just getting back to that healthy body fat range a little bit quicker. And I feel like there is a time and a place for that. But for me, I used that as an excuse and completely went with it, you know?
Yeah,
but I started like feeling my body with not the best foods. And I've never done that before. And I had periods of overeating. I wouldn't say there were binges, but I definitely experienced overeating. And for me, it didn't feel good because I grew up in a culture where dieting is not a thing. I never had an eating disorder. I never had any of those things. So I was experiencing these, I don't know, these psychological things with food that I never have. And I was like, I don't want to ever feel like that. So I think I took that time and really reflected on everything. And when I went back into competition prep, I made sure that I was in a position to start a prep. And again, just reinforce my values on like, okay, it's not over until that reverse diet is over. And that last time, it just kind of clicked to me. Was I perfect? Maybe not. You know, maybe a few macros here and there because we're human. And obviously after a competition prep, you do want to like have that flexibility. But at the end of the day, I was just going back to like, hey, food is not going anywhere. And if I really want to, I can make this chocolate fit into my macros every single day, you know? And I think just reminding myself that those things are not going to go anywhere and this is just a temporary phase that I chose to be in really helped me. And I mean, again, I probably wasn't perfect, but I was 90% on it this year. And this past year, and I was just so proud because it allowed me to get to this point of homeostasis that I've just, it gets better every time that you do it. So I think experiencing that side of things and knowing I don't ever want to go through that again because it wasn't healthy for me physically or mentally, and just learning from it and moving forward.
Yeah, I think going through that pain, right, it does help you reflect on like, ooh, I don't want to do that again. So, so in 2019, like, what do you think are the factors that led to you like going a little bit over after your 2019 season? Like, how far did you get over your stage weight and how quickly?
So it probably wasn't much, but for me, it was a lot because I've never seen my body that heavy. Okay. So I know people are going to be like, girl, you weren't bad. And I'm like, I get that. But for me, it was heavy. And at that point, I didn't have a lot of muscle mass like I have right now. So it looked completely different. So I went 20 pounds above my stage weight in the course of like 5 months. For me, that's a lot. So I've never done it that rapidly. And I'm sure everybody's experience is different, but nobody teaches you how to like gain weight gracefully, right? So, and how to like just take it as it comes. But I think for me, one thing was when I did my first building phase before my first ever competition, the different side of that is that I was really embracing the weight gain because I was in control. I wanted to put on muscle. I wanted to gain weight. I was in a very healthy mindset, right? With this time around, I wasn't trying to do those things that rapidly. And I think I felt a little bit out of control and I didn't feel proud of the fact that I was gaining weight in that way because I was supposed to be in control, if that makes sense. And things that led to it was me not paying attention to the signs that my body was giving me when it was telling me, hey, I need a rest. So in 2017 and 2018, I went a whole year of competing straight through. So I was able to win my pro card, but yeah, I got that bug that I just wanted to keep going. And I took about 6 months away from the stage. And granted, this is not enough time to like get back to a healthy place. Like at 6 months, you're just feeling like, almost like, oh my gosh, I think I reached normal. And right when I reached that point, I was like, let's start a prep again. Boom. And I think I just ignored those. I don't know if you have experienced this when you get that little like anxiety of like, I'm not ready to diet just yet. And you need to listen to your body. But I ignore all those signs. And yeah, if you're not there mentally, the body's not going to follow. So I feel like my adherence to a prep, you know, thrived, but the minute that prep was gone, that willpower wasn't there. I was like, F it. Let's see what I can get away with, you know?
Yeah, and I think some of that too has to do with like prep mindset. It's like you're always so dialed in that you get to a point where I feel like it just feels like too much and you just want to break. And sometimes that break is more than you wanted it to be, right? It's like, I know after my first season, like I was like, I'll just have this one meal. And then that one meal turned into like one weekend. And that weekend turned into like a week. And then I was finally like, okay, Tamara, like this needs to end. Like but at the time, because like you said, I hadn't had issues with like dieting or eating disorders. And I started bodybuilding. And I'm like experiencing these things and hearing things, honestly, that I had never heard of before. I was like, why are people like, I had a bodybuilder come up to me at the gym and say, and it was a male, and he said that he would eat food during prep and then he would spit it back out. And I was like, dude, that's like disordered eating, right? But like, I think it's so prevalent in the sport that people just think that it's supposed to happen. So I'm glad to hear that you were able to conquer that. And I think that we all experience, like you said, different degrees. It's different for everybody. But I like talking about it because I think that people don't always know that that's a part of the journey, and that for a lot of us, like, and I even tell people, just if you're just dieting for the first time you ever have, or you've lost a lot of weight, like you're going to feel different in your body. Those changes are you're not always prepared for them in the way you think you might be. And checking your mindset, and like you said, just like being mindful of what's really going on with your body and listening to your body is so important, especially when you're making transformation and change, because you're not familiar with it. It's all new territory. So you really have to check in with yourself. So thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about what you've been doing off season. So I also saw that you've been in the glute lab, and I'm like super jelly because I want to work out. Like I have been focusing on my glutes for the season. It's like my area I want to improve before I compete again. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I know a lot of women also want to develop glutes, and you've been working out with the glute guy himself. So can you tell us a little bit about your training off season and your work in the glute lab?
Yeah, I mean, it's been like a dream come true, like working in person with Brett, because I started doing like the Booty by Brett in 2020. And that first, I think that was my third off season. I might be wrong, but I started doing his program back then. And I loved it. I was like, I can't believe I'm only doing 5 to 6 exercises. That's it. And getting stupid strong. Like my strength was going so crazy high. And you know, you get to a point, as you might not experience this, but as a bikini competitor, you get to a point where you no longer can train in a certain way because you're trying to really sculpt just the glutes without making the quads grow, right? So we get to this very specific phase. And for some reason, I thought that I needed to stop doing certain things to continue to just grow my glutes. So I swapped out this last season a little bit of my training, but I am so happy that I'm back to training with Brett and doing this because it makes me really happy, and I see the most change and growth when I'm getting strong. And when, you know, I feel like there is a time and a place for ISO movements, but when you're prioritizing on your compounds at the beginning and really focusing on getting strong and doing progressive overload in a smart manner, that's when the magic happens. And we don't get too crazy. Like we might switch out the hip thrust variation in different ways just to spice things up, but at the end of the day it's a hip thrust. Or we might switch out our lunge variation or squat pattern, but at the end of the day you're still doing a squat and a lunge. So it's really cool because with him I've learned that you have to target all parts of the glutes in order to have that amazing shape. So yeah, we're not neglecting anything and we're training hard, and that's been really, really fun to do that again.
Yeah, it always feels good to get stronger, especially after you've been through prep and you just watch yourself get weaker and weaker. And you feel like you're losing all your gains, and then you're like, oh, I'm back at it again. Okay, so you mentioned there's like 5 exercises. So what are the 5 main exercises that you do to focus on the glutes so that you hit all the different parts like you talked about?
So we always do a hip thrust variation or a glute bridge variation. We do a squat movement or a lunge movement. We do kickbacks, and then something that targets that glute medius. Usually we do 2 of those because we love those. We're really all about that upper glute these days in the bikini category and like in competing world. So we do like lateral walks or cable lateral raises, and we're really spoiled where we have this machine that literally just targets the glute medius. They call it the snow angel. So we fall all the way back, and it's like an abduction machine, but you look like you're doing a snow angel. It's amazing, but you can replicate it at home, or not at home, at the gym. If you elevate yourself into a glute bridge position in the abduction machine, it looks crazy, but it will target that part. And it's so nice when you're finally like, there it is. So yeah, it's been awesome.
And talk a little bit about like glute activation, because I know for some people, like especially if our glutes are weak, and can be hard to like really feel them. And I know before we talked about like shoulders. So for your glutes specifically, was there anything that you had to do to really like get that mindset of, okay, I'm targeting my glutes, so that you're not just like working out your hamstrings or your quads, and you're actually like getting the activation you need in your glutes to get stronger?
That's such a good question. And there's a lot of conflicting evidence of whether or not doing activation movements really works, but they don't hurt. And that's the beauty of it. So I always tell people, like, just do what you find that works for you. And if doing those, banded lateral walks side to side right before a set, or maybe doing the abduction machine right before going into deadlifts or something like that helps you with that mind muscle connection, that's perfect and it works for you. I personally have struggled in the past with really isolating my glutes and feeling the movements in my glutes. I've been one of those people. So I do a few banded movements, but now I've gotten to the point where exercise selection is my priority. So if we are doing again, we're using the hip thrust as an example. If we're using a hip thrust, there's a variation for me that I'm going to feel my best, or there's a machine that I'm going to feel my best versus, I don't know, Lolita over there. She might feel a standard hip thrust, but I won't, right? I might feel it better in a machine, or I might feel it better if I elevate my legs a little bit, or if I do partials, or I'm a big fan of the 1 1/4 hip thrust. It's so good. And that's the one that I feel the most.
Or what's the 1 1/4? Tell us what that is. What's the 1 1/4 hip thrust?
That means that you do a full range, just like a normal hip thrust, and then second is going to be a partial a quarter down. So like a little pulse and then come all the way down. And that would be 1 rep. So it's basically 2 in 1. But the pump in these is just ridiculous. And you can do this with moderate to lightweight and go into the higher rep ranges, so 15 to 20s, and it's gonna feel amazing. The other one that I really enjoy has been using the glute drive machine, but banded, and I'll do the band around my knees. And again, I am somebody that feels the glute bridges more in the higher rep ranges, so in the 15 to 20s, but I do incorporate, even though I don't love it, I do incorporate those strength days where I am in the lower rep range positions because I feel that they help my higher rep range days. So it all goes hand in hand. So if you want to see progress over here, you have to put in those strength days as well.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the diet too, because I know that there are some people who are frustrated with certain body parts not growing, and glutes is a common one, right? It's like, what am I doing wrong? Like I've been doing these banded walks, and I've been doing kickbacks of like 15 pounds or whatever for like a year, and I don't see any growth. So talk about like the diet component of that. Like, do you find that with you and with the people you've worked with that you absolutely have to be in a surplus to get good gains in your glutes, or can you do a recomp? Can you be in maintenance and still get that growth? Like, what works best for most people, right? Not like, I know for bodybuilders, it after a while, right? Like you have to be in that surplus because you won't get any more gains, but just kind of give an idea of like, what have you seen that works for most people?
So it really depends on the individual, I find. So if it's somebody that's really underweight, a slight surplus is going to be very beneficial, and obviously having that protein intake high. And just having that, I feel, especially if it's a newbie lifter, they're gonna see so much progress if they just go straight into that slight, calorie increase, versus somebody like me that I'm really happy with where my body fat level is. I've been actually to recomp quite a bit and even increase my glute size by just eating at maintenance, but consistently. And sometimes I will eat a little bit over maintenance in certain periods just to continue to see those gains. But honestly, it's just being consistent and being very patient, because with maintenance phases, those are really slow. They're slow, but the recomp is really where it's happening, like the magic. So I feel like people just get very impatient because they don't see that change quick. But it's so nice because it just puts you, at least for me, if I decide to compete later on, it's going to put me in a really good position and a really good starting point where I don't need to be doing mini cuts in my off season. So I think both sides are great. It just depends on the individual, what works for them, their timeline, all of that.
Okay. And with that, like, do you also see any mistakes that people make? Like, what would you say is like the most common mistake? Like, if someone comes to you and they say, Natalie, like, I've been working on this, I've been trying, but my glutes just aren't growing. Like, what is usually the culprit of that?
So sometimes I see exercise selection is a big one, but like execution too. I just feel like people they could be having like sometimes 10 years of experience, but they're just moving the weight, they're not really like focusing on that movement or trying to get better at that movement, which has been crazy. Or they're not eating enough, they're not meeting their protein targets, because you'll see people, oh, I'm eating 2,000 calories, I'm doing all the things, I do cardio and this and that, but their protein is like non-existent, or they forget to track every time that they go out and they might be under eating or something like that. But yeah, usually I feel like it's mostly the protein content when people are like, I'm doing all the things, and then they track and they're like, oh, actually I've only was hitting 40 grams of protein. I get that a lot.
Wow. Yeah, if I had $1 for every time I had a client that said, I was like, well, how much protein did you get? And once we start tracking within a few weeks, they're like, oh my gosh, like everything feels different. I'm not hungry all the time anymore. I don't have cravings. It's almost like a magic pill. I'm like, see how simple it can be? But I think you're right. Sometimes we just ignore the basics of like wanting to get better, having that beginner's mindset, right? I always try to approach even not just new movements, but if it's a movement I haven't done in a while, I will try to come back to it. Like let me make sure my form is correct. Like I hadn't done deadlifts in a while because I was just like so depleted in prep, and I was like, I can't do deadlifts right now. I'm going to hurt myself. But when I got back to it, I was like, I'm going to just like take it easy. Like I'm not going to go in there and try to just hit my last PR, because that's not respecting the weight. It's not respecting my body. And I do need to recalibrate. So I think you're right. I think it doesn't matter how much experience you have. Like you always have to go into the gym like with the respect for like what you're trying to do, and then really be mindful of like, okay, what is my goal here? And actually track things. Because I think even tracking your workouts, right? Like if you're not, how do you know you're doing progressive overload if you don't write your workouts down?
Exactly.
You're like, oh, I think last month I was doing 80 pounds. Like, how do you know? My definitely being 42 now, like I don't trust my memory. So I always write things down.
Same. I use the notes section on my phone, I used to have an app, but then I realized I was like too much on my phone. But the notes section, and if I block all the apps out, I'm fine. Or pen and paper. That used to be my go-to for the longest time, pen and paper. But yeah, there's so many amazing apps like the Strong app and things like that that help you track progress over time. But that is a must.
So tell us what is next for you. I know that you're in your off season right now, but are you planning to compete again, or are you hanging up the heels for a while? What's the future look like for Natalie in 2024 and 25?
So right now I'm just focusing on my work. Like I've been really falling in love with coaching, so I'm going to be focusing on my challenges this year and just developing more recipes, more content for YouTube. Those are like my priorities right now, where I'm really having fun. As far as like physique for me, I'm just having fun with getting fitter and stronger and just trying new different skills, sports. I'm really enjoying just taking a little bit of time to just not be so structured with everything, because in past off seasons, I had no chill, and I've been doing this for 7 years. So I was like, I owe it to myself to just go and, have fun every day. And that's how I've been looking at it. As far as competing in 2025, it's a big maybe for me. I saw that the NPC and IFBB are releasing natural shows, so that got my attention. I'm like, ooh, maybe. But it could be 2026. Who knows? For now, I'm not closing that door just yet, but I do think I need to take a step back for a little bit and just focus on those other things for now.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and actually I was going to tell you this. I didn't tell you before we started recording, but someone that I met just randomly, it wasn't even like about fitness. We got to talking, and she's vegan, and she said that she was doing your challenge and that she was really enjoying it. I can't remember her name right now, so I apologize. I'll let you know after. But she didn't even know that, like, that I knew you or whatever, even that I was a bodybuilder. She was like, oh, I'm doing this challenge, Fit Vegan Chef. Like, I'm having so much fun. And she said for the first time she's been hitting her protein.
Aww, that's awesome.
So that's good to hear, because we just talked about, right, how important that is. So from what I hear, the challenges are going great, and I'm glad to hear you're coaching, because I think when we first started talking, I was like looking for a coach, and you like referred me because you weren't doing coaching virtually at the time. And I was like, but you would be such a great coach. And I talked to other people and they were like, Natalie would be such a great coach. So I'm so glad that you are doing that, because I know people are inspired by your content, by your recipes. I know I've used your recipes during many a prep. And so it's good that you're stepping into that and that you've got some help as well, because I know that also makes it easier, because coaching's hard work. It takes a lot out of you.
It is. It really is. But I'm so excited that I got to do it and that I got asked to do it. And honestly, like, people asking constantly over the past 7 years, but I just wanted to make sure that I was like in a good mindset for it as well, because with competition, you know, it just takes so much out of you. And I just didn't want to put that into my my basket if I knew I couldn't give it 100%. And I'm in such a good place right now that it's just fun. It's fun. And I have an amazing assistant coach too, that we just, you know, tag team everything. And it's just been really fun.
Well, that's great. And I think the whole lesson I'm getting from our conversation is just like getting back to enjoying things. Like when we're in that grind mode for too long with anything, especially with our bodies, like sometimes you do just have to focus on what you enjoy, because if you enjoy it, you're going to keep doing it. If you're seeing it like work, or you have to punish yourself or whatever, then you're not going to keep it up. At some point, you're going to stop punishing yourself, because nobody wants to suffer voluntarily. So there is a fine line between hard work and pushing yourself towards a goal, and when it just becomes like suffering and it's too much. So I think it's glad to see, it looks like you found that balance. And I'm looking forward to see what else you'll be doing in the future. How can folks get in touch with you if they want to learn more? They should probably already know if they're listening to this, but just in case they don't, how can they get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your program?
So on IG is Fit Vegan Chef. On my website is Fit Vegan Chef. And then YouTube would be Natalie Matthews Fit Vegan Chef.
Okay, very cool. Well, thank you, Natalie, for taking time to talk to me today. And I hope to see more of what you're doing in the future. And maybe we'll see you on stage again soon. But yeah, I look forward to following more of what you're doing for this year coming up. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Natalie and that you got a few tips that you will include in your routine. I know for me, the Snow Angels one was new. That actually looks like it would be a little bit awkward to do without the equipment, but I definitely am going to try some of the things that you mentioned, and definitely comment and let me know what you're going to try to incorporate into your workout that you learned from this episode. As you know, if you're listening to this, I'm going to put my coach hat on and say, we need to move into action. Consuming content, listening to podcasts like this is great, but only if we're ready and willing to move forward and implement what we're learning. So let me know in the comments. Also, you can follow us on Instagram at Plan and Power Fitness. Let us know there, what about this episode you found useful? And don't forget to share it with a friend that might be trying to build their glutes as well. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast so that you'll be notified the minute our next episode is released. With that, as always, I hope you have a happy and healthy day. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Plant Empowered Fitness podcast. Connect with us on Instagram at Plant Empowered Fitness. To find out how we can help you meet your personal health and fitness goals, go to plantempoweredfitness.com. That's plantempoweredfitness.com.